mocked a janitor at a gala. Her brother hid from the storm, and the quiet night watchman had seen enough. One truth is about to change everything.
What if the person everyone mocks is the one holding the master key to every locked door? The rain hammered Lagos like talking drums gone wild. Inside Meridian Gallery, the air smelled of old money, perfume, and fresh varnish. A sea of silk and tuxedos moved under the chandelier light. Zara Okonkwo held a mop as if it were a spear she did not want to use. Her uniform hung loose, sleeves damp from the leak she had tried to stop with buckets, and a prayer whispered in a mother's tongue. At her chest, tucked into a clear sleeve inside her bag, lay a half-finished watercolor her mother had left behind. A marketplace full of mango gold and indigo cloth, faces laughing under a sky that looked like it had a pulse. That painting was the only thing that still made her believe morning would come. "Faster," snapped Victoria Ashford, the gallery's executive director, heels clicking like a metronome of contempt. "You are dripping on the hand-woven carpet. Do you want donors to skate tonight?" Zara kept her eyes on the floor. "Yes, madam." "Speak up. And what is that?" Victoria pointed with her champagne flute toward a shadow behind the sculpture base. It was Kofi, Zara's younger brother, sitting small as a folded leaf, palms pressed to his ears against the noise. He had slipped in when a thunderclap had shaken the building. He hated storms. Zara had texted him to wait at the back exit, but he had come inside, searching for her like a moth for the only light it trusts. "My brother," she said softly. "He is on the spectrum. The storm." "In a storage room?" Victoria's laugh sliced the air. "This is a gala, not a daycare. Out, now." Guests turned like birds catching a sudden wind. A few faces softened, but most watched with the hungry calm of people who expect a spectacle. Zara guided Kofi out from behind the base, holding both his hands so he would not curl into himself. He was taller now, almost a head above her, but in storms he was again a child clinging to their mother's wrapper. "Please," Zara said, "he will be quiet. He will sit with me by the back corridor while I finish the spill." Victoria stepped closer, the diamond at her throat catching light like a tiny blade. "No, you will finish nothing. You bring personal problems into a house of culture, you hide in corners with your family complications, and you think you belong here. Security." A guard paused. The old night watchman near the service door looked up, eyes a calm brown under his gray cap. His uniform was clean but threadbare, and he stood with a slight limp, as if one knee remembered a long-ago injury. People called him Mr. Finch because of the way he watched from the edges, quiet as a small bird that sees everything. He held Zara's gaze, then dropped it to the mop, to the painting peeking from her bag, and back to her face with something like apology threaded through concern. Victoria raised her voice so it carried. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry for the disturbance. We strive for excellence, and sometimes charity hires forget where they are." Her smile was sweet poison. "Zara, you are finished, fired, effective this minute. You will sign your termination letter before you leave, and leave the property immediately." The room hummed. Someone whispered, "Harsh." Someone else said, "About time." At the far end, a donor lifted his glass and smirked, as if cruelty were a garnish. Zara swallowed the salt in her mouth that was not from rain. "Please, madam, I need this job. My rent, not my concern." Victoria's gaze slid to Kofi. "And you know what? I will be reporting this to the authorities. This is an unsafe environment for someone like him. He needs proper management, not a sister who drags him around like a handbag." Kofi flinched at the word management, eyes wide, searching Zara's face for meaning. She squeezed his fingers. "We are leaving," she said. "We are leaving right now." They walked out under stairs heavy as stones. No one moved to help. Even the music paused, then continued, pretending nothing had broken. At the door, Mr. Finch shifted as if to speak, then only tipped his head. For a heartbeat, his gaze landed on the watercolor. There was recognition there, a question, and something like grief that had reheated itself on a low fire for many years. On the street, rain embraced them like an unkind relative. The sidewalk was a river in a hurry. They shared one umbrella that had given up on dignity. Kofi's breath came fast. "Noise," he whispered. "Too many drums." "It will pass," she said, though she was not sure. We go home. We find quiet. The taxi ride was long, and the bill was a wound. Up the old stairwell that smelled of wet cement and frying oil, their apartment waited like a tired friend. The ceiling dripped into a bucket, making a beat that was almost music. On the table, a paper lay under a rock. The landlord's notice, stamped in red. Eviction in 2 days. 2 days had become 1. The date had slid forward like a snake. Zara sat with the watercolor in her lap and listened to the rain and Kofi's breathing. Somewhere below, someone laughed too loudly while a radio tried to lift spirits and failed. "We will be fine," she whispered, the lie tender as a lullaby. "We always find a way." When lightning rolled its shoulders over the city again, Kofi curled on the mat and began to rock, counting with his fingers, lips moving. He had been calmer lately, but fear is a river that carves old paths. His hand knocked the pill bottle. Empty. She had stretched the prescription for 2 weeks, cutting tablets, praying. Her chest squeezed. At dawn, the light was the sickly yellow of old bones. Kofi's hands trembled. "Noise in my head," he murmured. "We are going to the clinic," she said. "Now." They reached the public hospital after a bus ride that felt like a test of patience and joints. The queue was a snake with no end. Faces lined with worry moved forward inch by inch. A nurse with kind eyes recognized Kofi and pressed a form into Zara's hand. "Out of medication again?" "Work ended," Zara said. "I will pay, somehow." "Do not worry today," the nurse said softly. "He is not the only one who hates storms." On a hard plastic chair, Zara held Kofi's hand as if she could anchor him to earth. The watercolor lay across her knees, covered from curious eyes with a cloth, but the weight of it was a kind of warmth. "Paint your way out," her mother used to say. "When a door is not a door, it is a painting." She rested her forehead against the paper and breathed. When the pharmacist slid a small package across the counter, relief washed her so hard her knees thought about quitting. She counted money. It came up short. She looked at the watercolor. Her throat closed. Outside the hospital, morning breathed steam off wet pavements. A pawn shop across the road wore its neon like an awkward smile. "I will come back," she told the painting under her breath, the way one speaks to a faithful dog left tied at a market stall. "I will come back for you." Kofi touched the edge with one fingertip, as if blessing it. An old man in a worn coat leaned against a wall opposite, watching them the way fishermen watch the tide, with patience and a private clock in the chest. The brim of his cap hid most of his face. When she turned, he looked away, pretending to be interested in a pigeon stepping like a tiny dancer. He had followed them from the hospital corridors, keeping the distance of someone who knows that rushing a frightened animal is unkind. His eyes held a secret he was not ready to let go of, a secret that could change the weight of everything in her life. Inside the pawn shop, fluorescent lights made everything look a little ashamed. Behind glass, 100 lost things waited to be loved again, or at least to be useful. The owner wore a smile thin as a blade. "What do you have?" Zara unwound the watercolor. Even in bad lighting, the market scene glowed. Colors that should not have been brave after so many years stood their ground. A woman in a head wrap laughed under a sun that was more feeling than physics. Brushstrokes flickered like the wings of birds you can only see out of the corner of your eye. "Nice copy," the owner said, mouth twisting. "Sentimental work, not much value. I can offer—" "It is worth more in my house than your money," she said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. She covered the paper. "Thank you." She was shaking, but she felt taller. Sometimes dignity is the only coin left. Back at the apartment, a plastic bag with the exact medication she needed waited on the doormat with a note that read, simply, "Take care of the boy." No signature, no demand, just those words, as if kindness had remembered their address. Zara looked up and down the wet corridor. No one watched. A door closed somewhere. Her heart beat louder than the drip in the ceiling. Blessings sometimes enter like thieves and leave you wondering if you deserve them. She gave Kofi the dose and held him until his shoulders loosened and the river in his mind slowed. For the first time in days, she let herself hope. A thin flame, yes, but flames do not apologize for their size, they simply burn. If this story already has your heart, give it a like and subscribe so more people hear voices like Zara's. Now, back to that stormy day, where the road was about to bend in a way no one expected. The following morning, a call came from a community art center on the mainland. A woman named Amina spoke in a voice that carried both authority and warmth. "We saw your sketches on the gallery's staff board. Someone recommended you as a teaching assistant. Can you come today?" Zara blinked at the ceiling as if it had written words there. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can." The art center was a bright building painted with murals of baobab trees, masked dancers, and women balancing baskets full of color. Children's laughter spilled into the courtyard like sunshine. Amina, a tough woman with laugh lines that told of battles and victories, handed Zara a smock and a schedule. "We pay weekly. It is not much. It is honest. Teach them what your mother taught you." "She did not teach in a school," Zara said, fingers tracing the smock's seam. "She taught at the table, between washing and worry." "That is where most teaching happens," Amina said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Zara stood in front of a dozen children with eyes like stars ready to explode. She showed them how to hold a brush as if it were an extension of their breath. She told them, "Paint the smell of rain, not just the cloud." She told them, "When you cannot speak, let color scream for you." She told them, "A market is not stalls and baskets. It is a song." As she spoke, she felt her mother's presence beside her like a hand on her back, steadying. On a shelf in the main room, she set the watercolor in a simple frame. It did not feel safe out in the open, but hiding it had begun to feel like burying a body. The children stood in front of it, pointing, arguing about whether the woman in the head wrap was laughing or singing. Evenings, Mr. Finch appeared near the art center's gate. He bought groundnuts from the vendor in the shade and watched from the fence. He never came in. He never spoke to Zara. But his eyes found the watercolor through the open door, and a tremor ran through his hand, as if a chord had been plucked in a guitar that had sat silent too long. In another life, years ago, when his own name weighed more than his uniform, he had watched a young painter at a cheap easel in a cramped apartment near the marina, painting a market that glowed from the inside. He had told her, quietly, "The world does not deserve you yet, but it will learn." And then a storm of board meetings and lawsuits had dragged him away, and when he came back, she had vanished into the city's pockets of quiet disaster. He had been searching ever since, not with billboards or the cavalry of investigators, but the way a father searches for a melody he once heard and cannot forget, following echoes, living in the shadow of a mistake that felt like a betrayal. One afternoon, a black sedan rolled up to the art center with windows so tinted they looked like midnight. Victoria stepped out in a white dress that tried to look innocent and failed. With her were two men in suits and a police officer who did not meet anyone's eyes for long. "Director Ashford," Amina said, wiping her hands on a cloth, "you do not visit often." "I'm here for stolen property," Victoria said crisply, pointing like a tourist at monuments. "That painting. Meridian inventory indicates a missing work from our archives. There it is, in your charming center." "It is mine," Zara said, her voice steady because fear and fury had already met in her throat and decided to stand shoulder to shoulder. "It is my mother's. She painted it at our table." "Do you have proof?" Victoria smiled like a cat who enjoyed the sound of birds more than their freedom. "I have paperwork. The Ashford collection acquired a series of market scenes by a local artist years ago. This is clearly one of them." "Officer?" The officer shifted, sorry written all over his posture, but duty held his shoulders. "We have to take it for verification, miss. You can file a claim." A child tugged Zara's sleeve. "Teacher, do not let them take the laughing lady." Zara's chest cracked. "You cannot steal the soul of a home and call it verification," she said. "But words do not always stop hands." Mr. Finch at the fence clenched his jaw so hard it ached. If he spoke now, if he revealed himself, he could stop this. But the timing was wrong. Too many eyes, too much risk for a person he had sworn to protect from storms she did not even know had names. He let the officer lift the frame. He watched the door close. He watched Zara's face copy the color of ash and shame and stubbornness. He told himself, not yet. He told himself, one more night. He told himself, if you truly want to fix what you broke, do not rush like a boy. Move like a river that knows where it is going. The center fell quiet, as if someone had covered its mouth with a cloth. Amina put a hand on Zara's shoulder. We will fight, she said. We always fight, Zara replied, but her voice had lost the heat and kept only the smoke. News traveled the way gossip does when it is fed by injustice. A social worker arrived at their apartment that evening, polite and earnest. We received a report, she said, concerns about Kofi's welfare. Zara made tea that neither of them drank. He has food, she said. He has medication. He has me. I can see that you care, the social worker said, but we have to visit to evaluate. The landlord hovered in the doorway, a man who wanted to be kind and wanted to be paid, and did not know which desire made him feel more like himself. Eviction, he said, apologetic and firm, tomorrow morning. Give us 1 week, Zara pleaded. I cannot, he said, not meeting her eyes. I have orders from the building owner. Who is the owner? She asked. He shrugged. A holding company. Fancy name, foreign origin. People with money love to hide behind letters. When night came, it had the heavy feel of a stranger who plans to stay too long. Lightning fled the city, but its memory sat in the corners. Zara lay awake listening to Kofi's breathing and the drip, drip, drip into the bucket. Somewhere past midnight, a footstep paused outside their door, then continued. The hair on her arms rose. She thought of the pawn shop, of Mr. Finch's eyes, of the way the watercolor had left her hands like a child taken by a bureaucracy that smiled while it stole. At dawn, knocks came like the start of a drum circle no one had invited. The landlord, 2 men with a paper that had too many words and not enough mercy. The social worker, face tight with duty. Behind them, a boy from downstairs, curious and wide-eyed, holding a plastic car with 1 missing wheel. Miss Okonkwo, the social worker said, we need to talk about temporary placement for your brother while we sort things out. The room tilted. Temporary placement sounded like a polite way of saying, we will take your heart and hold it somewhere you cannot reach. Kofi stood in the doorway, eyes too calm, the way he got when fear was a flood and calm was a boat he built inside himself, plank by plank. Zara, he said, voice flat, do not let them move me. She stood between him and the door. No, she said, not today. Amina arrived like a small storm with a smile. Excuse me, she told the men. Is there a judge's order? No? Then you can speak, and then you can leave. She ducked into the kitchen and emerged with a folder thick with forms. Also, we applied for emergency support for this family yesterday. Here is the receipt. Words collided and argued. The men softened slightly, then snapped back to procedure. The social worker tried to listen and tried to assert and tried not to cry. It was a slow-motion battle where the weapons were paper cuts and delays. Then the lights went out. Not a citywide cut. A click, a tiny sound, and their apartment went dark while the corridor glowed. Someone had flipped their switch. The landlord stammered. I did not. From the stairwell, a voice rose, soft and firm. Turn it back on. It was Mr. Finch, cap in his hand for the first time. He looked older in the daylight, but his posture had changed. The limp was there, but it did not define him. In his eyes, a decision had been made and could not be unmade. Who are you? The landlord asked. Just a man who hates bullies, he said, and a shareholder in the company that owns this building. Would you like to see the letter? He held up paper with a letterhead that made the landlord step back as if it were a snake or a saint. Turn it back on, he repeated. The landlord fumbled with his phone, called someone, nodded, and within a breath the lights returned, humming like flies over fruit. But the eviction men did not leave. Papers still lay on the table like teeth. The social worker still held her duty like a shield she wished she could set down. Zara's knees felt like borrowed furniture. She took Kofi's hand. Go to Amina's office, she whispered. Wait there. Close the door. Count the dots on the rug if you must. I will come to you. Kofi looked at her, then at Mr. Finch, then at the door. He moved, slow and deliberate, the way he did when he wanted to show he was cooperating but not surrendering. When he had gone, the apartment felt like a throat holding back a scream. Miss Okonkwo, one of the men said, we will return with enforcement. Bring yours, Mr. Finch said quietly. We will bring ours. His gaze met Zara's. A flicker passed between them, an understanding that was not yet a plan. A city can hold 1,000 private wars inside one quiet morning. By afternoon, the art center buzzed with whispers. Victoria had posted a photo of herself on social media, smiling beside the seized watercolor now hanging in a Meridian back office as a rediscovered jewel from the Ashford collection. She captioned it with words about culture, stewardship, and beauty. Comments bloomed, divided as always: adoration, skepticism, fury, indifference. Money had its own fan club. Amina's phone lit up with a message that felt like a slap. The center's grant from the Meridian Foundation was under review, funds frozen. Salaries due on Friday became question marks. Of course, Amina said, rubbing her eyebrow hard enough to pull a tear back inside. Of course she would. Zara stared at the photo until she thought she might burn a hole through the screen. Her mother's brushstrokes, her mother's laughter trapped in pigment, now being used as a trophy. She felt a heat in her chest that was not anger alone. It was something deeper, older, the kind of rage that sits in a family's stories where great-grandmothers whisper that patience is not always a virtue. Sometimes it is an excuse. She did not see Mr. Finch step into the center until he was there, hat in his hands, hair flattened by rain and worry. Amina's eyes widened. Sir? He looked at the watercolor's empty spot on the wall, then at Zara. We need to talk, he said. Zara's jaw tightened. You watched them take it. You watched me lose the last thing my mother left me. Yes, he said, pain moving through his face like a shadow of a bird. And I have a reason you may hate, and I have a plan you may not trust. But if you will listen, I will tell you a story that began before you were born and has been asking me for an ending for too many years. Why should I trust you? She asked. Because I recognize those brushstrokes, he said, and because I am the reason that painting exists, and because I am the reason your mother disappeared. The room stopped breathing. Outside, a hawker shouted about oranges as if fruit could save the world. Zara's hands went cold. What did you say? He took a breath he had been postponing for years. My name is Charles Ashford, he said. People call me Mr. Finch when I wear this uniform. I own Meridian, and I failed your mother when she needed me. I came to fix what I broke. Amina's hand flew to her mouth. Zara's vision blurred. Mr. Finch, Charles, did not flinch. He stood as if he had expected a blow and decided to accept it without stepping back. The truth had arrived like harmattan dust, everywhere, unavoidable, settling on the tongue. Do you think this changes anything? A voice rang out from the doorway, smooth and sharp. Victoria stood there, smile bright as a blade. Dressing up as a night watchman does not absolve you, Uncle. Uncle. The word fell like a cracked plate. You set the stage, she said to Charles, stepping inside without asking. But I decided how the play would end. The children stared from the hallway, delight and fear fighting in their eyes. Amina herded them gently away, murmuring a proverb about not letting goats eat your yams just because they look cute when they beg. Zara turned to Charles. Is she telling the truth? He nodded once, a movement that cost him. My brother's child, he said. Raised with more entitlement than education. I thought I could guide her. I was wrong. You betrayed me, Victoria said to him, echoing words he had not yet spoken. You hid money in charities. You paid janitors more than required. You let a gutter girl's painting hang in your heart. You called that girl's mother a prodigy, and you refused to sign the partnership with the men who could have tripled our profits. You were weak. So I became what this city rewards, strong, efficient, untouchable. You became cruel, he said softly. There is a difference. Cruelty is a tool, she said, and I am an artist. A child's paintbrush fell. The small sound made everyone jump. You stole the painting, Zara said. You froze the grant. You called the authorities on Kofi. Why? Because people like you do not hold power in my house, Victoria said. Because you needed to be reminded of your place. Because fear keeps the world in order. Outside, thunder grumbled far away as if the sky were clearing its throat before speaking. Charles stepped forward, dropping the cap entirely, standing as tall as he could even with the limp that hummed in the bones. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather folder that smelled of old paper and old decisions. You think I am weak? He said. Listen. Years ago, I brought a young painter into the Meridian family. I promised to shield her from sharks. I failed. A deal I refused angered men who do not like to be told no. Your father did not protect her either. He pushed her out. He called it necessary restructuring. The day she left, I swore to find her, to buy back what was taken, to build a place where children like Zara and boys like Kofi were not turned into weapons by rich people's virtue theater. He laid a document on the table. Here is the original acquisition ledger of the so-called Ashford collection. Your inventory is a lie. The market series you claim never belonged to Meridian. They were loaned. Then they vanished. I have been paying private investigators for years to track provenance. 2 months ago, one sent me a photo of a janitor with paint on her hands, carrying a market scene that could only be the work of the woman I failed. I put on a uniform and went to see the truth with my own eyes. Victoria laughed, but it sounded thinner now. Grand speeches. Where are the receipts? Here, he said, a stack of papers heavy with signatures and stamps and the smell of ink that had dried beside tears. And here is a court order I obtained this morning, an injunction against you, freezing your authority to dispose of any art until we complete a full audit. Injunction? Victoria's smile wavered. You do not have the board. The board, Charles said, joined me an hour ago. They are waiting at Meridian. So are journalists, and so is your father's lawyer, who finally decided he is tired of cleaning up behind you. For a heartbeat, all sound dropped out of the air. Then the city resumed, taxis honking, a goat bleating, a neighbor singing off-key, life insisting upon itself. Victoria's eyes hardened. You think you can embarrass me? In public? Yes, Charles said, not unkindly, because you embarrassed a girl in public while using my name. You should have retired quietly, she hissed. You should have let me be the queen I am. Queens protect the vulnerable, Amina said calmly from the doorway. You are just loud. Get out of my way, Victoria snapped, or I will shut down this playground forever. Amina stepped forward until she and Victoria were face to face, two kinds of power meeting at a border. Try me, Amina said. Try shutting down the place that keeps children safe after school. Try explaining to the press why your foundation froze funds on the day you seized a painting from a teacher who feeds those children bread with her own money. Victoria's nostrils flared. She pivoted on her heel. Enjoy your little rebellion, she said over her shoulder. It ends tonight. She left a trail of expensive scent and cheap threats. The room exhaled. We need to move, Charles said. Zara, can you come with me? There will be a fight. It will be ugly, but you deserve to stand where truth is spoken. Amina squeezed Zara's hand. Go, she said. I will keep Kofi busy with clay. He likes the feel. It calms him. We will be here when you return. Zara looked at Charles, at the limp, at the eyes that carried both guilt and resolve, at the hands that had probably signed papers worth more than she would see in 10 lives, and yet trembled now for reasons that had nothing to do with money. If you lie, she said, I will never forgive you. If I lie, he said, I will never forgive myself. On the drive to Meridian, Lagos rolled by in a blur of bright umbrellas, hawkers with trays balanced like small worlds, Danfo buses that moved with the confidence of cats. Charles's driver knew all the shortcuts and all the long stories. Charles spoke in low tones as if telling a bedtime story to a wounded adult. When my son was your age, he said, a factory fire in one of our subsidiaries took him from me, not instantly, slowly, over months. The papers reported the incident as a loss of equipment. They did not print the nights I sat in a chair and counted his breaths. After that, art was the only thing that made sense. Your mother painted the way some people pray. When she vanished, I learned that money cannot always map a disappearance. Sometimes only patience and presence can. Zara watched the road. Why a uniform? She asked. Why not knock on my door as a man with power? Because power makes people adjust their faces, he said. I needed to see the truth of yours when you thought no one important was watching. You watched me humiliated, she said. And I wanted to tear the world in half, he said. But if I had stepped between you and her then, it would have been a private victory and a public loss. I wanted the city to see. They arrived at Meridian to a strange festival of cameras, microphones, and power suits, sweating under expensive jackets. The lobby glowed sterile. Security guards shifted, unsure which uniform to obey. The board members stood in a tight knot, faces lined with calculations. Journalists sniffed the air for the scent of scandal like lions following blood. Victoria stood at the top of the stairs in a dress that dared the world to blink first. "Welcome," she said, voice sugar dipped in vinegar. "What a shame to turn a house of culture into a circus." "You did that when you made cruelty a performance," Charles replied. A lawyer began to speak in a tone that implied he had been expensive since childhood. He read out dates and orders, proofs and pen strokes. He laid the injunction on a velvet-covered table as if it were a chalice. "Ms. Ashford," a journalist called out, "did you fire a janitor publicly last night?" Victoria's smile did not touch her eyes. "We have standards," she said. "We enforce them." "Did you seize a painting from a community center?" "That painting belongs to Meridian," she lied smoothly. "We recovered it." "Does it?" Charles asked, lifting the ledger. "Shall we turn to the page your father tried to keep blank?" If the moment had a sound, it was a rope snapping. "Look closely," he told the cameras. "Read the artist's name. Not anonymous market scenes. Read it." A journalist leaned in. "A name," she murmured, surprised. "There is a name. Saad Okonkwo." Zara's breath caught. Her mother's name on paper that mattered felt like a small resurrection. "Who is Saad Okonkwo?" another journalist asked, sensing a seam of gold. Eyes found Zara as if a magnet had been placed behind her. "I am her daughter," Zara said, stepping forward. Her voice did not shake. "And that painting did not belong to Meridian. It belonged to a woman who painted market laughter into paper so that poor children could remember joy when food ran out." The room shifted. People who had come for blood tasted something like honor and were momentarily confused. "Ms. Ashford," a journalist pressed, "did you know about this ledger?" Victoria's gaze flicked to the paper and back to the cameras. "This is theater," she said. "My uncle plays dress-up. A cleaner plays art historian. Cute. But investors do not care about stories." A door opened at the back. A man stepped in with a box marked Archives. He wore the expression of a clerk who had spent his life being ignored and had decided today was not one of those days. "Excuse me," he said. "Someone asked for the old storage manifest. It was behind a cabinet, fell during the rain." He placed it on the table. The photographer in him could not help framing the scene. The cameras loved it. Paper spilled like confetti, but the kind thrown at revolutions. "Here," the clerk said, pointing with ink-stained fingers, "loan forms signed by Saad Okonkwo, and a note from Mr. Ashford requesting continued support for the artist, and a memo from," he paused, "from Ms. Victoria Ashford recommending termination of the support for budget optimization." The room inhaled. In that breath, futures changed course. Victoria's smile cracked. "This proves nothing," she said. "It proves everything," Charles replied. "And we are not finished." He nodded to a technician. Lights dimmed in the side gallery. A projection bloomed on the wall, archives of internal emails, scanned letters, a timeline that painted a picture no fancy statement could wash away. The crowd watched the story of a young artist uplifted and then discarded when she declined to sign a contract that would have turned her into a factory. They watched a girl's name erased and replaced with anonymous. They watched a family foundation divert funds away from community spaces when those spaces did not flatter donors loudly enough. Somewhere in the second row, a donor who had always liked to be seen being kind took off his glasses slowly, as if the world looked different without them. A low murmur rolled through the lobby, a sound like distant thunder that comes not from the sky, but from people deciding they have seen enough. "Ms. Ashford," a reporter said, voice calm and sharp enough to slice, "do you intend to apologize publicly to Ms. Okonkwo for the way you treated her last night?" Victoria's eyes searched for a door that would open for her. All of them were shut. She lifted her chin. "No," she said, brittle. "This is a misunderstanding." The board chair, a woman with the posture of someone who had built her own bridges, cleared her throat. "It is not," she said. "Ms. Victoria Ashford, you are suspended pending investigation." Silence held like a stunned animal. Then, cameras flashed like impatient stars. Victoria's face went still. For a second, the girl she had been peeked through the mask frightened and furious. Then, she spun toward Zara, a smile stretching too wide. "Well played," she said. "Enjoy your moment. Remember that the world loves to lift and loves to drop. The same crowd that cheers today will not stand tomorrow." "Tomorrow will come," Zara said softly, "and we will keep painting." Victoria moved toward the exit. Two security guards, suddenly very alert to which way the wind had turned, stepped into her path. She laughed, stepping around them, tossing a glance at Charles that could have curdled milk. "The night watchman trick was cute," she said, "but the game is not over." When the doors closed behind her, the room applauded not politely, but with the relief of people who had been swallowing something bitter and could finally spit. It was messy, imperfect, human. Charles turned to Zara. In his eyes, water. In his posture, humility. "I cannot return what was taken from your mother," he said, voice low, "but I can acknowledge it, and I can offer you what I should have offered her without hesitation, a place, resources, freedom. Will you accept a fellowship in her name to paint, to teach, to curate the market series properly, to tell the story right?" Zara's throat tightened. She looked past him to the children peeking around the doorway, to Amina standing with arms folded like a general who knows winning is not the same as ending, to Kofi pressing his forehead to the glass, needing reassurance that this particular storm was safe to watch. "Yes," she said, "but with conditions." Charles's mouth twitched. "Good." "First," she said, counting on her fingers, though she had not planned to be this bold, "the community center grant is restored and doubled. Second, every document that erased my mother's name is corrected publicly. Third, the cleaning staff get their overtime paid retroactively. Fourth, Kofi gets access to proper care without us having to beg or perform." "Done," Charles said, without theatrics. "And fifth," she added, quieter, "you tell me everything. You tell me the parts of the story you tried to carry alone. No more disguises." He nodded. "Fifth is the hardest," he said. "But yes." They stood there, two people from different ends of a map called power, holding the same rope and pulling in the same direction for once. When victory comes, it does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears the relief in a brother's shoulders when the social worker says, "We are closing the case. He stays with you." Sometimes it wears the smile of a janitor counting a back pay envelope that makes his eyes shine in a way a chandelier never could. Sometimes it smells like egusi stew, shared around a table where the laughter is louder than the old sadness. Days passed like a flock of white birds, messy and beautiful. Zara moved into a small apartment with a real lock and windows that closed. Light fell differently there, kinder. She began to paint again at night, not because she had to, but because she could. She taught in the afternoon, children bringing her found objects the way pilgrims bring offerings. She curated an exhibition called Threads of the Market, hanging the recovered works under her mother's name, letting the city see what had always been true. At the opening, the hall filled with faces that had once looked at her and seen a mop. Now they looked and saw a person holding a brush with steady hands. Kofi stood by a sculpture he made with bottle caps, telling anyone who would listen about patterns and order, his voice confident, his eyes steady. Charles watched from the back, leaning on his cane, his pride quiet, not wanting to steal light. A reporter asked Zara, "How does it feel to have everything you ever wanted?" She laughed softly. "This is not everything," she said. "This is a beginning." The night ended with music that had lived in the city's bones, long before any gallery hung any painting. People danced between canvases, between stories, between versions of themselves. It felt like a blessing that had finally found the right address. Then, when the lights were dim and the guard checked the doors and the last song embarrassingly faded, Zara wandered back to the storage room, that old room where cleaning supplies whispered and brooms stood like soldiers at attention. She was looking for a missing label. She found a box instead. It was unremarkable, brown cardboard, tape yellowed with age. On the lid, an old Meridian stamp and a handwritten note, S. Okonkwo. Personal, do not catalog. Her fingertips went cold. She lifted the lid. Inside, bundled letters tied with twine, photographs curling at the edges, a crumpled envelope with a return address she did not know, a contract with a signature that made her throat close. At the bottom, wrapped in a scarf that smelled faintly of soap and sunlight, a small notebook. Her mother's handwriting covered its pages in tidy loops and bursts. The first page read, "If one day my daughter comes to this room, please forgive me for leaving before I could teach you the last lesson." Her knees gave. She sat on the floor, back against a shelf, the box a treasure and a wound. The world shrank to the size of paper, and the sound of her breathing. The letters told a story inside the story. Her mother had not simply vanished. She had left to protect her children from a threat with a name Zara recognized from the news, a developer whose projects left neighborhoods emptied and promises unkept. He had wanted the market, the painting, the woman who could make people love the market so much they would fight to keep it. When love becomes a weapon, the target moves. Her mother had moved. She had planned to return when it was safe. But the city has a way of swallowing intentions. There was more. A birth certificate, not hers, with a father's name blacked out badly. Another document with the same name clearly visible. It was not a name she had said aloud, but it had been in her life like a scent in a room you cannot place. Charles. Not as father. As legal guardian named in a will her mother had written but never had witnessed properly. He had been meant to look after them if she did not come back. He had never received the papers. The box had slept behind a cabinet, collecting dust and stealing years. Zara closed her eyes. Her mother's voice seemed to rise from the paper, soft and stern. A choice was walking toward her with quiet feet. What would she do with this truth? Expose it, protect it, wound with it, heal with it? She carried the box to Charles's office. He was working under a lamp that made him look like a portrait. He looked up, saw the box, and his face changed in a way that made her forgive him before she knew what she was forgiving. "I found this," she said, "hidden." He lifted the scarf, the notebook, the letters. He read the first lines. His hand shook. "She trusted me," he whispered, "and I failed to be where the trust could find me." "You did not know," Zara said, "but now you do." He looked at the birth certificate, at the line where a name had been obscured and then revealed. His eyes found hers, afraid and fierce. "This will hurt someone," he said. "No matter how we move, it could damage reputations, split families, invite tabloids to feed. Or it could close a circle quietly if we choose that road." Zara held the notebook. It was warm from her hands, or maybe it made hands warm. She thought of Kofi's laugh when the clay took the shape he wanted. She thought of Amina's face when the grant unfroze, the way relief had made her look younger and older at the same time. She thought of Victoria's eyes, bright and mean, but also of the fear that had lived behind the meanness like a child behind a wall. She thought of Charles's limp, a body remembering pain the way an old drum remembers songs. "What would you do," she asked, "if you held a letter that could break a life or mend a wound?" "I have broken enough," he said, "but this is your choice, not mine." She walked to the window. Lagos glittered and groaned and promised beneath her like a restless friend. She imagined her mother's fingers guiding hers along the page. She imagined little Zara at the table, watching paint become market, markets become stories, stories become shields. She turned back, feeling the choice settle in her chest like a bird folding its wings before sleep. "We protect the living," she said. "We honor the dead with truth told kindly, not shouted. We tell the people who need to know, in rooms where tea can be offered and hands can be held. We do not feed wolves." Charles nodded slowly. "Then we begin there," he said. "Tomorrow." "Not tomorrow," she said. "Today, before fear grows legs." He stood, reached for his cane, then for her hand. It was the first time they had touched. It felt like stepping onto a bridge that had held for years without anyone trusting it enough to cross. They walked together down a corridor that had once felt like a tunnel and now felt like a road. At the end, the door opened to the night. Inside that night, a city breathed, and people made choices that would echo in quiet rooms and loud squares. Somewhere in the distance, Victoria sat alone in a car, hands on the wheel, face lit by the dashboard's cold light. She stared at her reflection in the windshield until it blurred. Her phone buzzed with messages she did not want to read. Power tastes like a fruit that grows bitter when you eat it alone. She did not know yet what she would do next. She only knew she was not finished. A week later, the market and the painting pulsed with life again, this time in real sky and real noise. Zara and Kofi stood there, breathing in the smell of ripe plantain and diesel and hope. Women called to them. Men argued about fish as if philosophy depended on it. Children ran, ridiculous and holy. Zara opened her notebook. Kofi took out a pencil and began to map the stalls with a precise joy that made strangers smile. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "What?" Kofi said, pencil moving. The city saying sorry, she said, and the city saying, try again. He smiled without looking up. I hear patterns, he said. They are calmer now. She laughed. Sky and canvas have a way of talking to each other when you let them. A story that began in rain did not end in sunshine. It ended in something better. It ended in shade built by hands that remembered what heat feels like. It ended in a proverb made flesh. When spiders unite their webs, they can tie up a lion. And because life loves a doorway left ajar, because no story worth telling closes all its windows, a package arrived at the art center one quiet afternoon with no return address. Inside, the seized watercolor, restored, wrapped in paper that smelled faintly of vanilla. A note, the handwriting sharp and controlled. I returned what never belonged to me. Do not thank me. I am not yet that person. But I am listening. V. The world does not fix itself in one act. It bends, then bends again. It learns. It forgets. It remembers when voices refuse to go silent. Let your voice be one of those. Let your kindness be sharp. Let your justice be warm.